Okay, thank you very much. First, establish the problem that we were trying to investigate in New Zealand, which has complicated months because we're in the wrong part of the world. We're in the southern hemisphere. The March, April, May is the autumn, and that's when most of the cull cows are culled. And you can see that is, at the end of the season, you can see that's linked to a very large rise in the number of recumbent cattle arriving at the abattoir. So a recumbent cow at the abattoir is a major problem for the abattoir, and also it's a major problem for the cow. So I was tasked to investigate why it was happening and what were the main causes. So the research focus was to review the published evidence, which wasn't very long because there's not a lot of published evidence, and then do a case control study identifying the likely cause, what's the underlying metabolic issue, or is it a metabolic issue at all, and then identify any potential risk factors that we can measure. So the causes of recumbency of animal abattoirs is physical inability to stand, obviously emaciation, severe lameness or broken legs or similar, and the second one is really disease, toxic mastitis, metritis, hypomagnesemia or hypocalcemia. So that's what's been reported in the literature previously as causes of recumbency at abattoir. However, under the New Zealand situation, it's illegal to send animals to slaughter that aren't able to stand. You can't send a down cow, you can't send an emaciated cow. If a cow's got severe lameness or a broken leg, you get prosecuted. So these animals were normal before transport. On a 1 to 9 body condition score, they're 3 to 4 generally, so they are moderate body condition score, target of 5. This is the end of the season before drying off, and in the New Zealand situation, body condition score is put on during the dry period. So these cows tend to be around body condition score 4, so they can put enough drying off, they can put a body condition score on to carve down around 5. In most cases, the recumbency wasn't on arrival, it was after being kept in the lairage. Anecdotal reports from the MPI inspectors. So we wanted to establish better how much of the recumbency was lairage related, how much it was arrival related. So talking to people, the general thoughts were metabolic disease was most likely. Hypomagnesemia was the most commonly suggested cause due to the reduced feed intake. Hypocalcemia was suggested as possible, but also said that it being the end of lactation, that was thought to be less likely. So then you start looking at the literature on transit recumbency or tetany. It's a mixed metabolic disease, tends to be low calcium in cattle. It's not just post-transport to slaughter. Sheep data from Pearson and Jensen, low calcium, high phosphorus, equivocal on the magnesium. Sheep data from Lucas, low magnesium and calcium, high phosphorus. And McBarron, going back to the 1950s, beef cattle with marginal calcium and marginal to normal magnesium. So nothing really consistent in the previous literature to strongly suggest which is the most likely. So we took 5 premises across New Zealand, 2 North Island. New Zealand is two islands, or 2 big islands, 2 North Islands, and 3 South Islands. 3 periods of time. We try to be clever and select animals during the March to May period rather than selecting everything. Unfortunately, that meant that we didn't collect as much because, as all good research should do, it decreased significantly the amount of the problem that you were trying to investigate. So then we did another go in September to October and got some more data, and then March to May in 2014. So how do we identify our case? We have a recumbent dairy cow. So that's a cow that went down, was recorded by the MPI veterinarians as having gone down at the abattoir, either on arrival or afterwards. And we only allowed 1 case per transport because obviously the other animals would have had similar transport to that cow. So 1 case per transport. We then had an ambulatory cow from the same farm as the case. That was our first control. So that was a cow that had been from the same farm, had the same transport as the cow that had gone down. So we could have a direct comparison between a cow that had come from the same place but not gone down and a cow that had come from the same place and had gone down. And then our two negative controls. The first one was the normal dairy cow from the most recent non-recumbent group. So we went back to the most recent transport that had come before the one that had the down cow and took samples from that cow and got data from that cow. And then we got the next group to be control 3, the next group of cows that arrived that didn't have any down cows. So we've got 3 controls, one on the transport where an animal went down that came from the same farm, and 2 from transport where there was no down cows at all. Got MPI to fill in the staff questionnaire. It wasn't this disgusting green, but it was a standard black and white. And so they got all the list. And this is stuff that they were collecting directly from the transport certificates that were filled in by the transport guys. So it didn't require any questionnaire. We did try phoning up individual farmers, and it didn't prove very successful because obviously farmers don't like being phoned up by Massey staff after MPI have complained to them that they've had down cows. So we do blood sample, beta-hydroxybutyrate and NEFAs for energy, macrominerals, Mg, PO4, calcium, dehydration and nutrient deficiency. We look at the total protein, muscle damage, CK, liver damage, GGT. In New Zealand, we have a lot of facial eczema, which affects cows in the January to May period. It's a very significant problem, which we caused by sporodesmin, produced by fungi growing on the pasture. And so we thought it quite possible that these cows were animals that were cull cows that had facial eczema. So we took blood sample from a case, control 1 cows and control 3 cows, but I had quite a lot of enthusiastic MPI vets, and they took it from control 2 cows as well. So the number of cases that we got, we had 62 from the 3 premises in the South Island. It was very dependent upon the enthusiasm of the MPI veterinarian. And in the North Island, we had 19 cases. Questionnaires returned. They were pretty good at returning their questionnaires. And there's a little bit of sometimes not all of the questionnaires and not all of the cows. Biochemistry results. So we got around 51 in the South Island and 20 in the South Island. So we've got a reasonable number of the animals that had cases, had questionnaires and biochemistry results. And then we've got 71 controls with 67 control 3s that had biochemistry results. So we can see, so we've got a reasonable data set that allowed us to make some good information on our data. Now, we wanted to know age, and basically you can see that despite the fact that we have a very expensive identification system in New Zealand, which is supposed to be able to track the individual cow, we go as sophisticated as counting the number of incisors to decide how old a cow is. So not a really useful. These are basically heifers. These are cows that have been milking for at least a season or more. Friesians, jerseys, Friesian cross jerseys, so that's by far the majority of the case. We were only interested in down dairy cows. We did get some down Angus and some down Herefords, but those got taken out. So the BCS, we can see the body condition score was where we expected it to be, around 3.5 to 4. That was the most common. Median in all cases, in all the controls, was 4. And the less than 3, slightly higher in the case in the controls as a percentage than the 2s and 3s, but not significantly different. Fat cows in New Zealand are extremely rare. So we would have nice to have had pregnancy data, but it was very dependent upon whether or not the MPI inspector, so we didn't really get enough pregnancy data to be useful. And particularly, as I say, the dried off data, most of the animals had not been dried off. They were being dried off by basically being sent to slaughter, so they've been culled without being dried off. So very few cows. So the first thing and most important thing is what sort of problem we're dealing with. Are we dealing with cows that are the cows that are down when they arrive, or are we dealing with cows that are down, that go down once they've been put into the lairage? And generally, we're dealing with cows that are down in the lairage. It's a lairage problem. There's a little bit of a problem in terms of arriving recumbent, but principally the problem is cows that look fine when they arrive and then they put in the lairage and they go down. So only 3 out of 58 consignments with a case that was recorded as having gone down the lairage was slaughtered the same day. So most of the cases that went down the lairage, they were kept overnight, and that was when they had the problem. And control 2 or 3 cows were much more likely to be slaughtered the same day. So the odds ratio was 8.4, 95% confidence intervals between 2.4 and 28.6. So a really huge issue. The cows arrive at the abattoir, kept overnight, they go down. That's a really big, important cause. No association with the age, the breed, the pregnancy status, the milking status, and the body condition score. The milking status, we really didn't have enough animals that were dried off to make a good comparison, nor pregnancy status. Pregnant animals didn't have enough. But the body condition score you can see here really nicely just across, no effective body condition score. It wasn't that the skinny cows were going down, they were all in moderate body condition generally, and so there wasn't any difference between the cases and the controls. The interesting thing was the first one was the big difference in distance travelled between the case and the controls. CK was significantly elevated. The phosphate was significantly lower. The TP was slightly higher, but not really biologically important at that sort of difference. And the calcium was low. So the biochemistry suggested that we were talking about a hypercalcemia with obviously muscle damage. If we start then comparing the cases and the controls, you can see if we compare the case with an animal that came from the same farm, much more likely to have elevated CK, even though they went down in the lairage, and very much more likely to have highly elevated CK. So there's something, muscle damage thing going on here, and we've got phosphates, calcium, both of those are significantly higher. If you compare the case to the controls, similar pattern, phosphates lower, calcium's lower. Interestingly, if you compare the control 1s to the controls 2 and 3, so none of these went down, you can see that the control 1s are much more likely to have a very high CK, and they've got this NEFA difference here. But I think this is the important one. There's something about the journey that increases the CK of our control 1 cows. So CK was very important. Obviously, all our down cows had increased CK, but only the 13 out of 70 had high CK, but normal calcium. Phosphorus, like it always is, was really related to calcium. There was a big difference between it becoming recumbent on arrival, where hypercalcemia was rare, but it was almost all the animals that were recumbent in the lairage had hypercalcemia. So there seemed to be 2 different syndromes going on. Most importantly, is a significant increase with distance. So the odds of recumbency for the longest journey was more than 10 times that of the shortest distance. Cows are just travelling too far. So we've got a hypercalcemia problem. We've got an increased CK of the control 1 cows, journey quality problem. We don't know about pregnancy and lactation status. So it would be nice to be able to say that we should dry the cows off first, but the problem is that if you're going to dry your cows off prior to transport, you can cause more problems. So my recommendations basically reduce your distance. We need to look at calcium supplementation. Magnesium supplementation might be useful, but it's certainly not going to be the sole solution. Dry off prior to transport, and then we need to get the slaughter premises to look and say, these animals have come a long way, we're not going to keep them overnight. We've had exactly the same problems investigating bobby calves, where animals kept overnight had a much higher morbidity than animals that were slaughtered as soon as they arrived. Thank you very much.